nos hallamos en un momento decisivo para la seguridad europea.
We have come together because we are at a decisive moment for European security, and therefore also for stability of the international order based on rules. Undoubtedly, a moment of uncertainty. Over the last few days, the media have been reporting some of the aspects of this uncertainty in the international order, but it is also a moment of hope, a moment of opportunity. And this is what I would also like to emphasize today in this appearance. Because for the first time in a long time, since Putin's invasion of Ukraine began 4 years ago, a security framework is beginning to take shape that may eventually allow the war to end and therefore a just and lasting peace to be achieved in Ukraine. We are indeed close to this agreement. As I said before, within the coalition of volunteers from the United States, from the European countries, and also from Ukraine, while waiting logically for this proposal to materialize and take shape and therefore be subsequently discussed and eventually agreed also with Russia in order to reach this peace. But I would like to highlight 3 fundamental aspects that have been discussed today and in which I believe we have been able to make substantial progress. The first of them is that at the moment, and I emphasize this, at the moment when the ceasefire is agreed, and therefore peace and the end of the war between Russia and Ukraine begin, a scheme of security guarantees in Ukraine will have to be proposed, where the coalition of volunteers of these 35 countries will have to lend a hand, and therefore participate actively. We are therefore beginning to have a concrete plan on how to articulate and deploy these guarantees. In short, how to protect the civilian population, which is currently under attack in Ukraine, to avoid new conflicts and therefore consolidate peace and end this war once and for all. Today, we have been able to discuss the Security Guarantee Plan and also to note the willingness of both the United States and all European allies and beyond Europe to implement the Security Guarantee Scheme. And in this context, I am convinced that Spain must be part of this effort. The third aspect for peace that we have discussed today is the reconstruction of Ukraine. Also, logically, of the European Union, to be able to rebuild and recover the path of prosperity that was cut off as a result of this invasion. That is why both the European Union and the member states of the European Union, and beyond the European Union, as well as other countries, including the Americans, are ready to put in place what is being called a prosperity package for Ukraine, containing aid, loans, incentives, and support mechanisms to rebuild its infrastructure and also to revitalize its economy. The international order must be based on the observance of fair rules and not on the law of the jungle. And this applies, of course, to Ukraine, which was the subject of today's meeting, but also logically to Gaza. And that is why we are also extremely concerned about the events taking place in other parts of the world, such as Venezuela. As you know, the government of Spain, from the very first moment, never recognized the government of Maduro, because it violated the rules, because its election was illegitimate. And precisely for that reason, it cannot recognize the legitimacy of a military action that is clearly illegal, that violates international law, and whose only objective seems to be none other than to change the executive of another country to appropriate its natural resources. The operation in Caracas is a terrible precedent and a very dangerous precedent, a precedent that, by the way, reminds us of past aggressions, and that pushes the world into a future of uncertainty and insecurity, like the one we already suffered after other invasions guided by a thirst for oil. Obviously, we cannot accept this, just as we cannot accept that the territorial integrity of a European state, such as Denmark, is explicitly threatened. We cannot accept it. We are not going to do it as a country, as a government. We will not remain silent in the face of violations of international law, which unfortunately are becoming more and more recurrent. Regarding the first question, I will indeed be meeting with most of the parliamentary groups of the House starting next Monday. I will do so to report on the substantive progress that has been made in the work that we have been developing at the technical level for more than a year, all member states of this coalition of the willing. I think it is very important to remember several points about these 4 years of war. First, that we are facing opportunity, and therefore there is an open-door hope that 2026 will be the year that ends this war in Ukraine. Therefore, in coherence, Spain, as a great European country, of course says yes to participating if the ceasefire takes place, and therefore opens the opportunity to consolidate peace and to definitively end the war on the Eastern Front, in this case in Ukraine, to participate in these 2 areas. 1. Reconstruction, with economic resources through the European Union, and also those that we can provide bilaterally. And 2, contributing to these security guarantees. These security guarantees have yet to be defined. And about Venezuela, I can confirm that my intention as president of the government is obviously to have a dialogue with the Venezuelan opposition, in this case with the leader of the Venezuelan opposition, Edmundo Gonzalez, who lives, by the way, in Spain, as well as with the current vice president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez. Because I believe that Spain can play a role of mediation, of contribution to the substantiation of a transition that ends in clean, free elections, where the Venezuelan people can vote in freedom and decide freely about their future. As I have said before in my speech, we did not recognize the Maduro regime because we considered that the rules had not been respected. And this was also attested by the United Nations in its report on the last presidential elections in Venezuela. Secondly, an illegitimacy cannot be answered with an illegality under international law, which is what has happened during the last few days in Caracas.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that we will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest news makers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry guards.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.